One Tree Hill was initially imagined not as the iconic TV series it became, but as a feature film titled Ravens. The narrative was deeply rooted in personal experiences, with basketball serving as more than just a sport. It was a way of life, a passion that transcended the court. His fervor for the game gave birth to the intense rivalry between Lucas and Nathan Scott, half-brothers with a shared talent but a world of differences. The sport became a metaphor for their relationship, competitive, challenging, but ultimately rooted in a shared history and love. As the story began to unfold, it became evident that the richness of the tale was better suited for the episodic format of television rather than the confines of a 2-hour film. The characters had depth, their relationships were layered, and the town of Tree Hill itself had stories lurking in every corner. It wasn't just about basketball or sibling rivalry, it was about love, loss, ambition, betrayal, and redemption. The decision to transition Ravens from a film script to a TV pilot was transformative. Television offered the expansive canvas needed to paint a detailed portrait of Tree Hill and its inhabitants. Characters who might have been mere footnotes in a film were given their own arcs, challenges, and growth. Relationships were allowed to develop organically, with the slow burn of some romances becoming fan favorite plot points. Moreover, the episodic nature of television allowed for real-time evolution. As the show progressed, it responded to cultural shifts, fan feedback, and the natural growth of its cast. What started as a tale of high school basketball and teenage angst matured into a narrative about life's complexities, challenges, and the enduring spirit of community. In retrospect, One Tree Hill finding its home on television seems like destiny. The series, with its intricate characters and multifaceted storylines, needed the space and time that only TV could offer. And in doing so, it not only captured the hearts of millions, but also solidified its place in the annals of television history. So, the beloved teen drama aired from 2003 to 2012. Over its 9-season run, it garnered a dedicated fan base and remains a cultural touchstone for many. While it's challenging to pinpoint a single magic formula that made the show so successful, several key elements contributed to its appeal. Character depth and development. The show presented multidimensional characters who evolved over time, from Lucas and Nathan's initial rivalry to their eventual brotherly bond, and Brooke's transformation from a party girl to a successful businesswoman. The character's growth was palpable and relatable. Tying into that, relatable themes. One Tree Hill tackled a range of issues that resonated with its target audience, including family dynamics, romantic relationships, friendships, personal ambitions, and the challenges of growing up. Engaging storylines. The show masterfully blended everyday teen issues with dramatic and sometimes even surreal plot points. This mix kept viewers on their toes and ensured that every episode was both relatable and exciting. Memorable quotes. The series is known for its profound and thought-provoking quotes, often delivered as voiceovers by Lucas Scott. These quotes added depth to the episodes and gave viewers food for thought. Strong female characters. While the show started with a focus on the Scott brothers, characters like Brooke, Peyton, and Haley quickly became fan favorites. Their individual journeys, struggles, and successes added layers to the narrative. Music. The show's soundtrack played a pivotal role in setting the mood and tone, from the iconic theme song I Don't Wanna Be by Gavin DeGraw to the tracks played at the fictional Trick nightclub. Music was an integral part of the One Tree Hill experience. Sense of community. The town of One Tree Hill, with its close-knit community, gave viewers a sense of belonging. The recurring locations like Karen's Cafe and the River Court became familiar spots that fans grew attached to. Real-life issues. The series didn't shy away from tackling challenges like school shootings, mental health, and personal loss. By addressing these issues, it provided a platform for discussions and reflections. Relationship dynamics. The intricate web of relationships, from friendships to romances to familial ties, was at the heart of the show. The ups and downs of these relationships kept viewers invested in the characters' lives. Loyalty and redemption. Many characters in the series made mistakes, but themes of loyalty, forgiveness, and redemption were consistently explored, emphasizing the idea that people can change and grow. In essence, the magic of One Tree Hill lies in its ability to blend relatable teen issues with engaging drama, memorable characters, and profound life lessons. The show's authenticity, combined with its willingness to delve deep into the human experience, made it a standout in the realm of teen dramas.
I would like to show him sometimes, though, what a mistake he's made.
Dan.
Mostly for Mom. And sometimes for me.
When we were introduced to Lucas, he was an outcast. He wasn't a loner or anything. He had friends, but essentially him and his posse could be described as the underdogs of the story. He grew up with a single mom and was this, I want to say open secret, but honestly, it's more like he was just this big reminder of an irresponsible thing two teens did that derailed their lives. They lived in a small town, so everyone knew about his story, and growing up, he was constantly reminded of it by his peers. That feeling of rejection really affected him growing up, especially growing up so close to what could have been, and seeing that his father was capable of stepping up for him, but essentially just didn't. Still, despite everything, he grew up to be a good kid, especially compared to what his brother was doing at the time, at least before the show started. Just like his father and his brother, he would play basketball, except instead of playing on a team like Nathan, he played on another smaller, more abandoned court, which really was a reflection of his status versus his brothers. The turning point of his life came when his uncle Keith, who's basically his father, vouched for him to join the team. This one thing would go on to change the lives of this group of characters we would later meet on the show. Once he joins the team, it sort of forces everyone to confront what they've been avoiding for years, basically Lucas's existence. So here's the thing about lead main characters. They walk on the thinnest line possible. It's so easy for a lead character out of a core cast to mess up. Like, the margin error is so little because they're usually front and center, and people don't usually feel it necessary to sort of dig more and understand where these characters might come from when they mess up, especially when the main character is presented as a good person instead of some sort of anti-hero. They aren't really allowed to mess up at all, because if they do, they're now the worst character on the show. But also, if they don't do anything, interesting or whatever, they're bland and boring and don't deserve all that so-called screen time they get. And here's the thing that blows my mind about One Tree Hill. So many things happen on the show that should make it easy to draw the line on who's actually a bad person versus someone who made a few mistakes and does get better over time. All this to say is that every time I make these videos, I might seem like I'm always out here defending unpopular opinions, but in all honesty, it just doesn't feel organic to me to just sit here and say someone is bad or good or awesome just because that's where the general public sides. Like, I could sit here and say that I like a character because they're popular and guarantee everyone in my comment section to be happy with me, but I'm not going to do that because it's simply just not how I feel. Now, with that being said, please, again, don't take my agreement or disagreement with you as a personal attack, because it's not that deep. We're all just here chatting about a fictional show from stories we enjoy indulging in, and I'm more than expecting that most of you will disagree, so the comment section is open for that. I'm completely open to changing my opinion on various topics, but I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't explain how and why I see the things the way that I do first. So, there's that. Now, you might ask why I needed to go on a tangent right here, and it's simply because I know how people feel about Lucas and also Peyton, now that I think about it. But don't worry, this isn't going to be some Lucas kissing section, but I'm also not just going to sit here and tear him down either. So, let's get back into it. I think most people watching the first few episodes could agree that Lucas was initially worth rooting for. I mean, he was this neglected kid who was seen as less than simply because his dad chose the other one. Like, no matter how you felt about him in the later seasons or episodes, you're most likely on his side when all these kids were ganging up on him just because he joined the team and Nathan didn't like him. Early on, we found out that he has a thing for his brother's girlfriend, Peyton. He's not exactly shy about it, even though she's really aggressive towards him at first. At this point, Nathan and Peyton are in a super toxic relationship. They permanently break up pretty early on the show, and so the coast eventually becomes clear. At the same time, his presence on the team is increasingly bothering Nathan, and in order to get to Lucas's weak point, he decides to get close to Haley, Lucas's best friend. These two storylines are where we get to know Lucas a little more, specifically his flaws. The flaws that this fandom would hold against him forever. Because, he's more than what meets the eye. He's quite the thinker, always reflecting on his life and his future. His passion for literature and writing really stands out. But interestingly, even with all that intelligence, he sometimes doesn't make the best decisions in his relationships. He can be super judgmental and has a strong sense of right and wrong, almost to a fault, because his decisions most of the time lead to more damage than good for him and those around him. I think the two seasons he messes up the most are in seasons 1 and 5. I mean, he's a bit reckless in season 2 when it comes to Dan, his heart condition, and Keith, but most of those things were things he would grow from and not repeat again, whereas his actions in season 1 would follow up all the way through his his penultimate season on the show. One thing, for example, that people disliked him for was how much crap he gave Haley when it came to her decision, specifically her joining the cheer squad and getting a tattoo. I mean, I understand that he was protective of Haley, rightfully so. Nathan did have bad intentions at first, but personally, I still think it was a bit hypocritical to sort of deny her the right to explore these other things the same way that he was. I mean, the thing with Luke is that he just takes such bad decisions while thinking he's doing it for the greater good. The way his mom was devastated in season 2 when he wouldn't be honest about his heart condition was a great example of how he doesn't handle certain things with enough care and thought. He's also a very resentful person. He tends to really hold on to things when they happen, and just when you think he's forgiven you, he'll just throw it back at you. But I think the most frustrating thing about Lucas, the trait that makes him so annoying and unlikable, is the fact that he's so indecisive. He is the definition of wanting to have his cake and eat it too. It's really annoying to watch as a viewer. I mean, it's not even that hard to understand why people don't like him. It's because of the way he is in his romantic relationships and how he treats the women he's with. He's very clear that he liked Peyton, and when he finally had the chance to get close to her, she rejected him. And all while this was happening, Brooke was also not shy about expressing her attraction towards him. So this is where all the drama started, because here we have one girl he likes but doesn't want anything real with him, and on the other side, this very interesting girl who's actually much deeper than expected has the confidence to go for him, and actually wants him. So what does he do? He goes for her, something a huge chunk of teenage boys would do if given the chance. Where he messes up is that he continues to have this emotional affair with Peyton whenever given the chance, which eventually leads to them kissing. He does try to make things right, but it wouldn't be One Tree Hill if one of them did get interrupted by a near-death experience. So he eventually breaks up with Brooke, and she doesn't really understand why until she sees Peyton and Lucas kissing through the webcam thingy. And she's pissed, justifiably so, and there's a whole lot of drama that comes from that breakup, like Brooke telling Lucas that she's pregnant and him pissing off both girls by hooking up with Nikki, who's the baby mama of one of their close friends. And this is where Lucas just starts getting messy and confusing with his actions, because he came back in season 2 and now claimed that Brooke was the one for him and that he was going to fight for her no matter what. And I'm aware that the change came from the real relationship between the actors. However, it is still canon. I think that Lucas was just in over his head during this time period, which explains why he tried to leave town with Keith. This kid went from being called names all the time and only really watching from the sidelines to suddenly being a part of this world that tore him down repeatedly. I mean, it messes with your head, the sudden validation you get from people who saw you as less than for the longest time. Lucas's issues boil down to one simple thing: Peyton. It's as simple as that. He, had these two not had so much trauma and issues between themselves, we probably wouldn't have ever seen the side of Lucas. I mean, for him, it has always been Peyton. It was always going to be Peyton no matter what. No matter how many times he tried to move on or tell himself that he was better off without her, he would always go back to her. He was quite literally tethered to her. His relationships with Brooke and Lindsay were just attempts to move on when he believed that Peyton wasn't an option for him anymore. I get it. Like, this girl he can't help himself from being in love with keeps sending him mixed messages, and whenever he tries to be vulnerable, she pushes him away. And I think people don't acknowledge the fact that Lucas not only has abandonment issues but also struggles with rejection. It does a lot to a person when someone who's supposed to love you unconditionally doesn't, and even if you don't realize it yourself, it's there. I definitely think that the way he went about trying to move on from Peyton was not only irresponsible, but dare I say it, selfish, because you're in love with this girl, so why are you trying to move on with her best friend? Like, the fact that he didn't think about how messy that would get just shows that Lucas doesn't really use his brain. Same with Lindsay. Of course he loved her. He just loved Peyton more, but she rejected his proposal and he took it the wrong way. And I think that what cemented him giving up on the relationship was Peyton not showing up after he reached out again. I think it confirmed in his head that she wouldn't go the distance with him if it came down to it. With both his relationships, with Brooke and Lindsay, you can tell how badly he wanted to make them work. Him telling Peyton that he hated her was so brutal, but it was an honest confirmation about how much his feelings for Peyton affected him and how powerless he truly was against it. I mean, there's a thin line between love and hate. And from Lucas's perspective, at least, he always loved Peyton more than she loved him. Like, Lucas wouldn't have ever cheated on Peyton in my opinion, had they gotten together early on. I'm sure of it. It just sucks that in the process of figuring out everyone else was just collateral. At the end of the day, Brooke didn't deserve to be in the middle, and Lindsay definitely didn't deserve it as well. But don't get me wrong, I'm saying all this, but Lucas still used to piss me the off whenever I watch the show. He has such extreme ways of handling things. It's so annoying, but I still don't hate him for it because his good outweighs his bad. Like, I'm sorry. Like, Lucas was a good friend. He was a good son and he was a good brother. He was a bad lover, a really bad one, but he was great everywhere else. You know, if you didn't know that side of him, you'd probably say that he's a great guy. I mean, if anything, him going to Jimmy's funeral, despite believing that he killed the only father he's ever had. I mean, Keith was going to adopt him for Christ's sake. And, you know, his mother was pregnant with his child. Like, they were going to get married. His mother was finally going to get her happy ending. Like, even though he was upset at first, he still found it in his heart to remember the friendship he once had with this kid and showed up for him one last time, even if it was the hardest thing for him to do. I mean, that was Lucas. He was, at the end of the day, a kind and caring person, even though his love life was his biggest flaw and weak point.
I never let myself meet anybody, ever. Not since my mom died. That was Lucas. He looks at me and he really sees me. You know, just right down into my soul.
Okay, let's talk about the other side of this controversial coin, Peyton Sawyer. Peyton Sawyer is one of the many characters on One Tree Hill who hasn't had it easy. You know, it's interesting because most of these characters all went through more drama individually than one could imagine. Yet when most think of trauma, they probably think of Peyton. It's probably because the entire characterization of Peyton is just trauma and suffering. The first thing we learn about Peyton is that she is an angry, popular girl. It's quite intriguing, actually. Like, why is this girl driving so recklessly? Why is she broadcasting herself on the internet? Why is she a cheerleader if she hates it so much? Like, her character was really interesting at the beginning. A few episodes in, we learned that she was a really happy girl until her mother ran a red light only one time and died from a car accident while coming to pick her up from school. The grief and loss are some things her character never really recovered from, especially since her dad was barely around. These events are what would form Peyton's personality for the rest of the show. Cut to junior year, she is in a super toxic relationship with Nathan. They always fight and break up, and he's constantly insulting her and her interests, and they finally break up for good, and he actually moves on way faster than she does. So here's where the drama starts for her. This guy, Lucas, likes her and she likes him, but she won't admit it, and when they finally have a chance to bond and get together, Peyton freaks out and rejects him. In the meantime, Brooke, her best friend, swoops in and gets together with Lucas just when she is ready to admit her feelings towards him. Here's the thing you need to know about Peyton. She has this issue with people and abandonment. It's, you know, not like a phase or anything. She actually struggles with the fear of people leaving her behind. Like, that's one of her things on the show. You know, she always says people always leave. Early on, we can tell that Peyton is also into Lucas, but from her reaction at the party when he tried to be vulnerable signal that she, in my opinion, I think at least, had some sort of like avoidant attachment style. You know, if you know anything about that attachment style, you'll know that it takes a lot of patience to make it work. Peyton's trauma made it hard for her to get close to people. You know, look at how pissed she was at Haley when she left. So, you know, how do you think she's going to react to someone for whom she has actual real serious romantic feelings for? Like, when Lucas tried to bond with her, it basically repulsed her. Yet interestingly, she was never more determined to get with Lucas than when he was unavailable. Like, it all checks out with her. you know, with her trauma. He is more desirable when he's not her because he's not hers to lose. But I can understand that it's extremely frustrating and annoying to watch this because it all just seems selfish, which I mean it is, but it's also a lot deeper than that. It's just, you know, it's definitely hard to root for her when it came to Lucas because of how she went about it. Peyton's actions regarding Lucas often seem to conflict with her usual moral stance. She crosses the line with Brooke multiple times and didn't treat Lindsay fairly either. You know, while I understand and appreciate the depth of her character, these aspects of Peyton are hard to overlook. Her love for Lucas sometimes appeared more possessive than anything else. You know, even though she was a compelling character, she sometimes let her feelings for Lucas overshadow her moral judgment. You know, when she confesses her feelings for Lucas to Brooke, it felt as though she was sort of downplaying Brooke's valid concerns about their history. Other than that, most of Peyton's character through the first 4 seasons felt like she was this eternal damsel in distress, with Lucas being her savior most of the time. You know, even that time Jake came to help her with her white powder problem in season 2, Lucas was the one who called him up. And it's not to say that she's this like weak ass character, because I don't think she is, but she was sort of the Debbie Downer on the show. The most brutal things kept happening to her, and I could say it was almost painful to root for her. Like, of all things, did she really need to meet her birth mom only to find her dead after finally bonding with her? Not to mention that she was the only student shot during the school shooting. Speaking of the school shooting, people who blame her for kissing the love of her life when she thought she was gonna die, really? Like, she thought she was going to die. Like, should she have told Brooke about it after? Yeah. Would it have made the situation worse? Yeah, especially since at that point Lucas was not expressing any kind of romantic interaction towards Peyton. So I can understand why she didn't think it was necessary. In general, Peyton's character makes me a little sad because everything around her almost felt wasteful because of all the behind the scene drama. Peyton was this super artistic girl with an incredible love for music and just human expression through art. She was full of good ideas and did a lot of cool things on the show, like with the all ages club trick and the Friends with Benefits album, starting a record label in Tree Hill. Like, she accomplished so much at a young age, and I mean, they all did, but Peyton is only, or mostly at least, remembered for both the bad things that she's done and the bad things that have happened to her. Obviously, we all know that there's some underlying issues with the way her character is written because of how the creator felt, or allegedly felt, about her, but it's still a shame because it basically ruined the legacy of her character. Maybe if she stayed for the entire run of the show, the general public would have felt differently about her. Now, I'm going to use this to segue into Brooke, but first I want to talk about the comparisons between Brooke and Peyton. I think it's really unfair when people say that they love Brooke because she's a good friend and say that they hate Peyton because she's a bad friend. I think the two of them were great friends to each other up until a certain point. I think there was a shift when they got to high school because sometimes growing up, people start to take different paths. To say that Peyton is a bad friend and doesn't deserve forgiveness for what she did with Lucas, but not reprimand Brooke for not only sleeping with Nathan and never telling Peyton, but also being completely aware that her friend was struggling with these feelings that she had for Lucas and just inserting herself into it just because she wanted to. Not to mention the fact that she was so cruel to everyone to that party, what she did to Haley and Nathan, and was intentionally humiliating everyone while later on trying to push Peyton to get back together with Nathan, all for the sole purpose of being able to go for Lucas freely when she was completely aware of how toxic Peyton and Nathan's relationship was and how it wasn't doing any good for Peyton. Let's not forget that it says a lot about someone's character how they treat you in a disagreement. To make fun of Peyton for not only having lost one but two mothers, like, that is a disgusting line that any so-called friend should never cross, especially after seeing how self-destructive these losses made Peyton. The only reason I feel the need to point this out, by the way, is because of the unfair double standard, because other than that, I think that Brooke is literally the most incredible, amazing human being who messed up a couple of times because she was pushed to an extreme. Obviously, there's a huge difference between the crap a 16-year-old does and what a 22-year-old does. I mean, Peyton was still up to her same antiques in season 5, while post-high school Brooke had actually developed and stopped making these mistakes from the past. But the whole being a bad friend thing honestly just really needs to stop, or just at least be fair instead of being biased because you like someone. They both messed up in the friendship, but they forgave each other. So why can't people forgive the characters since they forgave each other? I just don't get it.
I am who I am. No excuses. But I'd like other people to know that there's a lot more to me than just some party girl.
Now, let's talk about Brooke and her development. Brooke Davis had a fascinating development. Initially, she started out as the on-paper definition of a self-centered, hot, popular high school girl. She was the cheerleading captain, she was a party girl, she was rich and sometimes kind of a mean girl. All in all, her biggest priority was having a good time and enjoying life as a person on top. We met Brooke at a point in her life where I honestly think she had lost herself. Growing up, her parents weren't good parents. I don't think that's even something people can argue over. Like, she had terrible parents who were vocal about the fact that she was more of a burden than anything else. Not only that, but they didn't exactly have a healthy relationship between themselves, and they just set a terrible example for Brooke. What her parents did do for her was that they gave her money, lots of it, and that was the only stability she knew. Cut to junior year, Brooke has never really been in a serious relationship, and she sees Lucas and takes a liking to him. Only issue is he likes her best friend, and her best friend likes him too. Now, because of these feelings, she created a mess at the start of the story. I think Brooke saw that Lucas was different, or at least she thought he was different from the other guys that were in her circle, and I think she felt safe with Lucas because of the way he presented himself. We, like Lucas, didn't know Brooke at first, and with him, we discovered that she had a hidden vulnerable side, most likely due to the treatment that she got as a child. So it's kind of a big deal for her to finally feel ready to open up to this guy. The problem with this story is that Lucas was already into Peyton, and at the end of the day, it was always going to be Peyton. But Brooke was such a compelling character. It's very obvious that if Lucas had a choice of who he would actually be so unconditionally in love with, it would have been Brooke. Now, unfortunately, we all know how the story goes. She gets cheated on the first time, and the second time, I think, might be worse, because after she finally puts her walls back up, Lucas did a whole bunch of everything only to realize that he doesn't even really like her like that. I think the disconnect disconnect between Leighton stans and Brooke stans is that Leighton stans sometimes downplay Brooke's feelings in this story. The argument is always, well, if she didn't get herself involved, then she wouldn't have gotten hurt. Like, she knew from the start that Lucas and Peyton liked each other. True that, but also Lucas did have a choice at one point, and he did choose Brooke. And I'll never hold it against Peyton for kissing Lucas when she thought she was gonna die, but I'm never going to be mad at Brooke for keeping her distance when two people she cared about consistently chose each other over her. Regardless of her involvement at the start, she came out the victim in that story. Like, out of all three, the story had the most negative impact on her. Like, imagine closing yourself off from people, and then your best friend and the first guy you ever trust go behind your back and basically make you look like a fool. You know, like, come on. I also noticed that some people don't get the hype around Brooke, and I admit it, she's definitely put on a pedestal in the fandom, but I think she deserves it, you know? I mean, I think a lot of people like to downplay her wrongdoings. That's true, and only acknowledge the bad things that have, you know, happened to her. But to me, with her character development, I think she deserves the hype. Morally, Brooke came out of the story winning. Like, she's the only one out of the three who really learned from her mistakes and didn't go back. You know, from this hurt and pain, she channeled it and built something huge out of it. Clothes over bros, and most importantly, she became a girl's girl, a more loyal friend than anyone on that show. Remember when Julian came into town and she wouldn't allow herself to be with him because he was Peyton's ex? And I mean, she could have not cared, like, you know, since she was so lonely at the time, but she did. Also, another thing that I remember people feeling weird about is how Brooke at 22 wanted a baby. I didn't think it was weird at all, because first off, she was extremely successful at a young age. Like, she got her company, you know, business well, she was fulfilled. There's really nothing more to do there. But looking around, she was standing there in all her success by herself. Because let's be real, Victoria didn't really count, you know, at the time. And as a person who was hurt and neglected by her parents, you could tell deep down inside that she had a need to repair the damage her parents had done. Because regardless of all the success she had in her life, her mom was only there conditionally and her father wasn't there at all. She had all this love to give and no one there to receive it. Like, it even makes me sad when I think about it. So on top of that, I remember being so mad at Lucas and Peyton when watching season 7, because that's where you could really see the damage done to Brooke. She could not for the life of her feel secure with Julian because he had the same savior dynamic, you know, with Alex that Lucas had with Peyton. Even though for Julian, nothing about it was romantic, how could Brooke trust that when Lucas and Peyton both assured her on multiple occasions that there was nothing there? You know, either way, even if you don't like Brooke, you have got to admit that she truly has a big heart. And at the end of the day, she is a loyal and supportive person. She's also extremely selfless. Like, she sold her company to help people, even though she didn't deserve to lose it. She forgave her parents a gazillion times over. And most importantly, she was the picture of resilience. She became so much as a character. And I can honestly say that, you know, she was an excellent role model.
I screw up a lot, all right? And being around you, I don't want to be that guy anymore.
Who do you want to be, Nathan?
I want to be somebody who's good enough to be seen with you.
Nathan Scott is a really interesting character to me because during the first few episodes, he sort of served as an antagonist on the show. He was an ass to pretty much every character he interacted with. He was a cocky, arrogant, privileged prick who really only cared about himself, kind of disrespectful to everyone and was really prideful. He knew he had a brother, but for whatever reason, instead of being civil with him, he chose to hate him for absolutely no concrete reason. I mean, Dan probably riled him up, but still, it doesn't erase his cruelty. In the fandom, there's always a debate about Nathan being the better brother because at least once he got with Haley, he stopped hurting others, but I don't think that's fair at all. We've only seen Nathan in 2 relationships, and in one he was great, but in the other one he was absolutely terrible and was way worse to Peyton than Lucas ever was with any girl on the show. Not to mention that if we're keeping score, both brothers have been involved with both girls at one point in time. I think what made it easy for Nathan to change was the kind of girl Haley was. Out of the bunch, she was the only one who had somewhat of a normal family life. She seemed to have grown up with a lot of love and had good parents as role models, especially romantically. That was not the case for Lucas or Nathan or Peyton or Brooke. All 4 of these guys grew up with some toxic role models when it came to love and other kinds of trauma like loss and parental absence. So if you look at the common denominator of how these relationships went south and who was involved, it was always these 4, not Haley. All of this to say, the comparison of all of these kids who grew up in cruel and unstable environments is unfair. Like, they were all victims of circumstances no one would choose to be in. Nathan Nathan became a better guy because he was finally with someone who was mentally stable and not entertaining any of the drama. Season 2 excluded. They were actually apparently trying to write Bethany out of the show. That's what I heard on the podcast. Anyway, so we will never know how Nathan would have been with other girls if he had moved on with Haley. Just like if Lucas and Peyton didn't have so many issues between them, they probably would have also been a stable couple. Anywho, just like most characters, Nathan had a really good side and a fairly bad side. I think the underlying, / overarching arc of his character on the show was fighting against his darker side, the side he took from his father. You could see it in the little things and in the big things that he did. Acting off of emotions is definitely something he took from Dan. Sometimes the consequences weren't too serious, but sometimes they were, like marrying his 16-year-old girlfriend of 3 months, intentionally crashing a racing car while going through marital problems, or getting into a bar fight the night before the NBA draft. Despite becoming a quote-unquote good guy so quickly in the story, he was still a flawed character. After his accident in season 5, he fell into a depression because of one stupid interaction he had on one night of his life. Everything he had worked for up until that point was now all gone. I remember him opening up to Haley about feeling like he lost everything, and she was hurt by the comment, rightfully so, but I think he meant it more in the sense of everything he had worked for. He was in a really dark place, and we sometimes as human beings tend to underappreciate what we have until we don't have it anymore. And in that moment, not only did he lose his dream, but he also lost his ability to do something he's done his entire life. So it makes sense that he felt that way in the moment, because Nathan's ego, just like Dan, drove him through a lot of his actions, and a huge part of their ego and self-worth came from the praise they got from the sport. And I'm pointing this out because people complained that his arc peaked in season 3 after he changed, and I get that, because compared to his pilot character, it was night and day by the end of season 1. But if you really look at his reactions in the later season, you'll notice that he was still growing and distancing himself from his father. Like there was a constant inner battle. It's not until he was talking to his father on his deathbed that he was really able to reconcile his feelings towards him, and effectively that part of himself too. Also, I want to address the nanny Carrie thing real quick, because although I think it was handled terribly by Nathan, like the way he handled the situation was wrong, point blank, he should have told Haley about it. I do think that the fact that he was recovering from a depression where his ego and self-worth took a big hit made him look the other way to something he should have handled immediately. I'm almost certain that Nathan was oblivious or doubting what was happening at first, and then later on probably didn't want to worry about it. And honestly, with the way that Nathan's head works, he knew he wasn't ever going to do anything with Carrie. So honestly, I don't think he wanted to stir the pot with Haley after everything that happened. Obviously in his head, it was just an innocent thing that helped him feel better about himself, and that was wrong. But Carrie was also aware of his situation and was very much manipulating him, not to mention that she literally sexually assaulted him. It's just that sometimes it's seen differently because Nathan is the man in the situation. In any case, Nathan is a commendable character for breaking the cycle. He became a good brother, which his father never was. He broke the cycle of being a verbally and psychologically abusive father and loved his son unconditionally, unlike his mother, who was mostly absent and constantly disappointing him as well. At the end of the day, he chose his family again and again, even at the expense of his career. They became his dream, and it was amazing to see him be fulfilled by all that, and I think heal his inner child.
I don't know why I should feel embarrassed for saying that I know what I want and I'm going to go after it like a guy.
Haley James was introduced as Lucas Scott's best friend. My favorite thing about her intro is the fact that they made a point to tell us that this was not going to be some Joey Dawson crap. These two would only ever be friends. Haley was one of the few characters who, at the start, I could say was mostly content with her life, for the most part. She worked at Karen's Cafe with Lucas, was pretty close to all of his basketball friends, did well in school, enjoyed learning, and honestly had a well-balanced home life. The only reason she got involved in the quote-unquote popular crowd was trying to do a good thing for her best friend, who at the time was struggling. As a character who started with not many issues, her journey on the show was quite interesting. Her relationship with Nathan was really the biggest, most prominent thing about her arc. As a person, Haley was strong-willed. Like, she never really got bullied into doing anything that she didn't want to do. She wasn't easily intimidated. She would stand up for herself, even at the risk of standing alone against everyone. She did what the she wanted and how she wanted to, if she believed that she was right. I mean, it's evident in her season 2 arc. Like, good lord, was it hard to tolerate Haley during that season. Even now, over a decade after watching this for the first time, it still pisses me the hell off how she acted this season. Regardless of how I felt about her actions, as a 16-year-old, Haley was in her right to seize this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Where the issue in the story arises is the fact that she was not only gaslighting everyone, including Lucas, she actually cheated on her husband with a very thing she kept telling him not to worry about. Now, this is a teen drama, and pretty much all of these guys have cheated, including some adults. But the way Haley dangles her moral compass over every character on the show, yet goes on and treats Nathan like this, kind of crazy. You know, the ultimatum was not a good way to go about the situation, but leaving without saying goodbye wasn't either. As a character, she embodied a blend of conscientiousness and idealism. She stood out with her strong moral compass and unwavering principles. At her core, Haley had an innate desire to uphold her integrity and be seen as someone who does the right thing. This drive was so potent that it sometimes overshadowed the other aspects of her personality. Her fear of being perceived as corrupt or flawed was palpable. It's that fear that often propelled her to strive for perfection, to ensure that she's always on the right path. However, in her quest to be morally upright, she was sometimes overly judgmental, holding others to the same high standards that she set for herself. This made her come across as critical or impatient, especially when others didn't meet her expectations. At her best, Haley was the moral compass of the show. She was discerning and able to differentiate between right and wrong with clarity that, others might lack. Her nobility shined through in the choices she made, with the exception of season 2. Even faced with challenging situations, she was the voice of reason, often guiding others towards the right path with her wisdom and insight. Every character has their complexities, and Haley was no exception. While her intentions were always rooted in goodness, her approach was sometimes rigid. Her judgmental side, especially when it came to those she cared about, created a strain on her relationships. She expected the best from everyone, and when they faltered, her disappointment was evident. Yet it's these very imperfections that made Haley a relatable and multidimensional character. Her journey on One Tree Hill is not just about triumphs, but also struggles in navigating the gray areas of life. It's a testament to the fact that even the most principled individuals grapple with their inner conflicts. Haley's character serves as a reminder that while striving for moral perfection is commendable, it's equally important to practice compassion and understanding, both for oneself and for others. But at the end of the day, she was a great mother and, for the most part, a great partner. Both her and Nathan messed up at different parts, but in general, they were also a really good role model. And in some ways, not entirely, but in some ways, she did save Nathan. And in general, she was also part of the catalyst to really change these people's lives and, make it change for the better. It's also really nice that her character also broke stereotypes. She wasn't just a smart girl, which there's nothing wrong with that, obviously, but it's like she was a smart girl who aspired to do other things. She became a teacher, a really good teacher who stood up for her students. She went on tour. She was a great mom, a great housewife. In general, she was just a really good character. Maybe sometimes not with the most interesting or exciting storylines, but still a very admirable character overall. Marvin McFadden, also known as Mouth, was sort of an honorary member of the Core Five. He is technically a main character, but there was still less of a focus on him as a main character compared to the other 5. He did get his fair share of struggles and storylines, though. Mouth was another one of Lucas's OG friends. When Lucas got into the popular crowd, Marvin joined as his plus one-ish. It's the best way I can explain it. He was passionate about sports and commentary and was an overall stand-up guy, okay? There are plenty of instances in which he was ready to take the fall to protect his friends. I think the greatest example was his willingness to risk his career to stand in solidarity with Nathan and fighting to keep the memory of his friend Jimmy alive. Now, on that note, the thing that has always bugged me about Marvin was his nice guy syndrome. He would befriend these girls and have romantic feelings for them and expect them to like him back because he was a decent human being to them. Like, he was really so entitled when it came to these women, especially with Brooke. He sort of reminded me of George O'Malley from Grey's Anatomy. And look, I'm not saying he was never let on, okay? Like, Rachel was super guilty of this. What bothered me the most is that Marvin is a reflection of how the show creator saw himself. It's a confirmed thing. It's real. It's out there. Look it up. We all know how he acted behind the scenes. So it's this messy idea that if you treat a woman the right way, then they sort of owe you something, which was very prominent in the media back then. I mean, it's only really now that we talk about it, but before, these girls were always villainized for not reciprocating these feelings and were told that they were deserving of their heartbreaks from these guys that they do actually like because they ignored the nice guys. But yeah, I mean, apart from that, his storylines in the later seasons were pretty detached from the rest of the group, to be honest. I mean, apart from that time he took a stand for Nathan, he usually interacted with Skills, Miss Lauren, Junk, Fergie, and of course Millie. Between their first date in season 5 to the 9th season, the two characters really gave us the oddest will they won't they. Like, there were lots of moments in their relationship that were in the gray area. I cannot remember one specific scene where they broke up. Yeah, I'm sure it happened at least twice. In the end, they were a cute pairing, and Mouth being supportive of her when she got the reporter gig instead of him was really showing of his good side. I'm happy they ended up together. Skills Taylor. Okay, so he's a character who's been on the show since the pilot. He was another one of Lucas's OG friends. Now, let's not lie to each other. He was an obvious token character. Like, we don't need to sugarcoat it. It is what it is. He was mostly there for good vibes, honestly. Like, he dated 3 girls on the show, Bevan, Lauren, and Deb. In the later seasons, he had a couple of dramas here and there, most notably when Nate found out that he was dating his mom and when Lauren and Mouth started hooking up. But apart from that, he was just always there to be fun. He had a lot of scenes with Jamie, and I think it's because Jackson really liked working with him. It was usually just, wholesome stuff with him. Like, pretty sure he ended up being a sports coordinator and going back and forth between LA and Tree Hill. He also had a couple of very random businesses like baby proofing and stuff. Also, I don't know if anyone picked up on the Easter egg when they were talking about the best sports films and Coach Carter came up. Antoine was actually a character in that movie. I love it when moments like that happen. But yeah, we love Skills up in here. We love him. All right, Jake Jagowski. So Jake was a Raven basketball member who appeared in the first 3 seasons of the show. He was Peyton's love interest most of the time and Lucas's only ally in the first couple of episodes. His character sort of stood out because he was a very nice and kind, guy, but also because he was a single teen dad. Before everything was set in stone, he was a big contender to being endgame with Peyton. Once it was established that the actor wouldn't stay, they sort of just made him a second option for Peyton. She liked him and wanted to be with him, but her feelings for Lucas prevented that. He was honestly my favorite guy on the show. Like, I wish Brian Greenberg didn't have another gig and had to leave. Like, it just sucks. They wrote him out using the fact that his character had issues with his baby mama and he left as a way to protect his daughter since she became his priority. All right, this girl had one of the messiest arcs on the show and left a mess pretty much everywhere she passed by. It's wild, okay? Rachel, much like Brooke, grew up without the presence of her parents. Living in a vast, empty house, she likely grappled with feelings of loneliness and lack of genuine affection. Her past marked by insecurities, possibly stemming from being overweight and facing bullying, shaped her choices, especially in relationships. By season 4, we witnessed a transformation in Rachel. She began to open up and form deeper connections with Brooke and Mouth, and I think the turning point from that came from the guilt she felt for releasing the time capsule. That indirectly was one of the worst things that she could have done on the show. Like, the snowball effect from that time capsule was crazy. But yeah, like everyone else, she did have a softer side. She let herself get expelled to ensure that Brooke graduated alongside her friends. Her character wore her heart on his sleeve, falling in love quickly and deeply. Like, this might have explained her intense infatuation with Cooper. And then she saw the similarities between Cooper and Nathan. Her affection shifted towards Nathan. The show writers arguably didn't do justice to her character by having her return as Dan's wife again. Now we all know that it's the show creator's fault, but it would have been better if she never came back, if it was just all for that. Like, her season 7 storyline was so uncomfortable to sit through. It just wasn't worth it, especially after the exit they gave her. But yeah, her role in the story never really changed. She was a troublemaker. And even when she got friendlier with the characters, she was still stirring trouble somewhere. Okay, Chase, the only reason I'm talking about him is because I feel like I have to. Even though there's not much digging to do here, he was introduced as Brooke's love interest in season 4, and he ended up fitting pretty okay with the rest of the cast. One thing about him is that out of this group of 22-year-olds, he was the only one who felt sort of relatable to me. He was just hanging out post-college, living life day by day until he figured out what he was going to do. Later on the show, they put him in a love triangle where these 2 girls were fighting over him, and then after that, they put him in a love triangle with Chris Keller, of all people. Like, everything about Chase sort of felt, super random and hilarious now that I think about it. But hey, they did give him a meaningful storyline with Chuck by the end of the show. But now that I'm thinking about it, who did he end up with, if he did at all? Like, I could probably look it up, but I'm a little lazy at the moment. So comment down below if Chase ended up with any of the other background characters on the show. I cannot remember. Joel's introduction to the show was really interesting to me because the first time I saw him, I really thought he was brought in to stir drama between Lucas and Peyton. The first time I saw the show, I had no idea that Hillary and Chad were leaving the show. So I was like, no, please, no, go away. Like, I can't take another love triangle. Please leave. Thankfully, the whole latent drama on and off crap was about to be wrapped up, so that was a good thing. Anywho, he was like kind of smug. He just kind of had this interesting edge to him, and I could see how he bonded with Peyton. Now, once he became a series regular, he became this like nerdy guy with questionable taste, like Grease 2, really? Like the sequel, really? I mean, there's nothing wrong with the way they portrayed him. It was just a pretty noticeable difference. Anyway, they were consistent with his complicated relationship with his father. He, just like most characters on the show, had a complicated relationship with his parents. His issues with his mother, for example, is the reason why he was so keen on helping Alex. I mean, I really enjoyed watching him and Brooke stand up for each other against their parents and be there for each other and heal each other. Like, it was some good stuff. His character ended up fitting in more organically than Quinn and Clay, which, let me get into that real quick. Clay was introduced as this new ladies' man, and then a few episodes in, we find out that he had this great love story and was married to this girl until she suddenly passed. Fine. I'll take it. He had chemistry with the actress, and I actually felt touched when I heard the story. And then they had to go and ruin it with the stalker storyline. Like, you could tell that they did not plan ahead for his character at all. Like, they just went with whatever. Because like in the final season, we find out that he had a child he completely forgot about for years. Like, I don't know much about this subject, so I won't talk about how realistic it is or not. But I will tell you one thing for sure. If this wasn't the last season, I probably would have stopped watching after this revelation. Like, I was over it. I was done. Quickly, let's wrap up this section with Quinn James. Quinn was the blandest addition on the show. Sorry to the people who like her. I'm sorry. First off, her reasoning for coming to Tree Hill was just nonsense to me. Just say you don't like David anymore and stop making excuses. Like, I get that she was adventurous and wanted to keep living life like that, but also to want to dictate what's more important to David, like, that was just, I don't know, to me it just, like, maybe he enjoyed his art and now he wanted more stability. That happens sometimes. I'm probably being too hard on her, but it just annoyed me so much. Like, David seems way more free spirit than Clay, so what exactly was their connection based on? I don't know. Anyway, the actress just wasn't great on the show. I know she's improved in other things, but she just didn't do it for me on the show. I am so sorry. Like, I'm being very biased here, but yeah, sorry. James Lucas Scott, simply nicknamed Jamie on the show, is Nathan and Haley's first child. After their time jump in season 5, he became one of the main characters and sort of changed the climate of the show. He had different roles in the story depending on how they needed the story to advance. Sometimes he would go through the typical struggles a kid can go through, like dealing with the meaner kids at school or wanting to spend time with his grandparents and not really caring about the past that he wasn't there to witness. But other times he would weirdly be the voice of reason. A lot of the time he would recenter and bring clarity to the characters because he saw things in a much simpler way than adults do. If I remember correctly, most people found him adorable and funny, but I've often heard people, especially recently, say they didn't appreciate his character as much because of how much he changed the show and how it sort of felt like it became the Jamie show. Either way, you know, even though he was a kid for the entirety of his arc on the show, they somehow managed to include him in a lot of the soapy, very dramatic parts of the show as well, and it's very interesting. He has a very interesting way of viewing the bad things that happen to the characters, and I do think that it is an interesting perspective to have on the show. Now, One Tree Hill is a show that gave pretty fair attention and drama to the adults, especially considering the fact that it's a teen drama. The relationship between the teenagers are in direct relation with the ones they have with the adults. Understanding and knowing about the adults is essential to understanding the motives of these teenagers. Without knowing Dan, you can't really imagine what made Nathan the way he was, or why Karen would choose to keep him away from Lucas when he did in fact ask for joint custody. We know to some extent how damaging Brooke's parents were in her childhood, but seeing it in the later seasons really does show you how much crap she overcame. Now, on that note, This is one of the most unserious group of adults that I've seen in a teen drama. They all just leave their kids to fend for themselves against stalkers and killers, don't show up at their graduations, wedding, or births. Obviously not all of them. Karen was the most present parent. She actually showed up. And so I'm not even trying to exaggerate or anything. Like, it was actually a thing. If a parent showed up, it was an event. It was a thing. It's like it was out of the ordinary. It was an exceptional thing if a parent showed up. Even supposedly good parents, like Haley's parents, for example, pretty sure they weren't at her graduation. I'm almost certain I didn't see them or when she gave birth to Jamie. It was just a thing, you know? Peyton's dad, for example, like after she met her birth mother and lost her, and a few months later was deceived by a stalker, pretended to be her brother, he didn't show up. He came after the shooting, but that wasn't enough. That wasn't enough because look at what happened after. She got shot, she recovered, and then she was in need of like bonding with someone, and then this guy comes and claims to be her brother, and she's totally vulnerable, and he could have killed her. Like, he could have lost his daughter, and he didn't show up after all of that happened. Maybe he did. I don't remember him being here, but it's no surprise that she has commitment issues. Brooke's mother, Victoria, was never shy about the fact that having Brooke was never what she wanted. Her father also wanted a son, so at birth, everything was already stacked up against her. Victoria in her past had fallen in love with a man who her parents didn't approve of because of his tax bracket and instead forced her to marry Ted Davis. That in itself made Victoria miserable, but the fact that she had a dream herself of owning a brand one day and couldn't because she had a child made her resent Brooke even more. Her father also did some stuff, cannot for the life of me remember right now, but all in all, they only started a redemption when they realized that their daughter wasn't worthless, i.e. owning a clothing brand. I mean, look, I choose to believe that they don't screw Brooke over another time because that would just be like downright evil. Like, I choose to believe that after the show ended, they got their shit together and started being there for their daughter. Now with Karen, I almost feel bad saying it, but she was also pretty problematic in her way of handling stuff. Like, that pride and resentfulness where Lucas can't let go of shit absolutely came from Karen. Like, if Karen wasn't happy with you, you would sometimes end up with slap marks on your face. She was erratic and sometimes just plain mean. A lot of the time she would react with such anger that I would feel bad for Lucas. Like, blaming Lucas for Keith's death was some fucked up ass shit, man. Like, Lucas had known Keith his whole life and he wasn't gonna have another father at this point. Like, that was done. You, on the other hand, would soon move on and be happy with someone else. And of course, I do think she was projecting her guilt over wasting so much time with Keith when they could have been happier way earlier. Not to mention she was pregnant and hormonal, but something as serious as Keith's death was a very cruel thing to blame on Lucas. But look, at the end of the day, she was there. She parented Lucas, even though she did deny him the right to know his father, which, knowing how the butterfly effect works, I can't say for sure whether that was a good thing or not. She still rose to the occasion and showed up. She gave Lucas stability, raised him to be the best, she could, and accomplished some great things on her own. Like, she did the damn thing. Like, all respect to her, honestly. Also, she probably had her own fair share of trauma to deal with too. And, sometimes people don't acknowledge that, but she had some issues as well that were unchecked and undealt with. And then we have Whitey, who was a basketball coach and was the only seemingly normal adult in Tree Hill. He suffered a tragedy by losing his wife early into their marriage and never remarried. He always spoke so highly of her and gave the kids a different perspective on love, relationships, and tragedy. He mostly had a tough love approach, but he was truly looking out for these kids and tried his best, to guide them, the best way he could. He was a really important figure for these kids, and again, pretty much the most normal adult in Tree Hill, or at least in these kids' lives. Keith was Dan Scott's brother and a father figure for his nephew. He was portrayed as the less successful but better appreciated Scott brother. After Dan abandoned Lucas, he stepped up and tried to be there for him and guide him into being a decent person. He was also in love with Lucas's mom for almost 2 decades and kind of just waited for her for years until he almost got married to a con artist. Just like all the other characters, Keith was flawed and he made his fair share of mistakes like drunk driving, even though the details around that are a little iffy, so I could be wrong. I know Dan envied Keith because he felt like people always preferred Keith no no matter how much effort he put in. And whether or not it was always like that, I don't know. But some of Keith's actions definitely didn't help. Like, obviously, there was nothing wrong with most of the things Keith was doing, but Keith stepping up and being there for Karen all those years and being in the delivery room with Dan's first child definitely confirmed all those insane thoughts and feelings that he had surrounding Keith. Not to mention that Keith would eventually sleep with his other wife and baby mama. That's what I think sealed his fate. Because of this, there was a whole snowball reaction with Jules and the marriage, and then Keith in his turn plotting to murder Dan like it was an insane bad blood story. Oh my goodness, I just realized that Dan and Keith remind me of Abel and Cain. I don't know if you know the story, but I mean, there's some really big differences, obviously, but all in all, a story of bad blood between brothers that results in the death of one of them. It's very interesting now that I think about it. Anyway, Keith is a very interesting character to me because I don't know if it was always intended for him to have such importance on the show or if it just happened by accident, but I've never seen a character who's not a supernatural character always come back the way that Keith does. He has much more of a presence in the lives of these kids than some of their parents, which is so wild when you think about it. Anywho, you know, it's sad that he died when he was in literally, I could say, the happiest stage of his life. He had finally gotten everything he was pining for, and his last actions was him trying to help someone, and he ended up dying for it. And for that, he would just end up becoming one of the most important characters on the show. So Deb was the other baby mama in the story. She was the one that Dan chose to marry and stay with. When we first met her, she seemed like a grounded, stable person, right? She got along fine with Dan. Granted, she was gone most of the time, and in hindsight, it's probably why she stayed with him that long. I mean, the more I think about it, the more I think she stayed away because she could only tolerate Dan in small doses. Anywho, first couple of episodes, seems like a completely put together person. A few episodes later, she starts fighting with Dan, and he brings out the worst in her. Just like Karen, Deb at times could also be really horrible to her child, like blaming Dan's heart attack on Nathan. Like, no lady, you're sleeping with Keith is probably what triggered it more than anything else. And again, I know that she was projecting too, but they really had this nasty habit of bringing down their kids when they were upset. Maybe it all ties into the way they became parents, and that in some ways it stunted their growth. Later in the show, she continues to go in a downward spiral with a pill addiction and being at full war with Dan, and it all comes to a tipping point when she tries to murder him but fails. Like, now we know what that led to, which is crazy. She does, however, try to fix her error and also becomes supportive of Nathan in his marriage. In the later years, she's still a part of the family life and has a great relationship with her grandson, Jamie. Now, regarding her relationship with Skills, personally, wasn't my cup of tea. I thought it was absolutely weird to have a relationship with someone your son grew up with. But hey, I guess there were two consenting adults, so whatever. Now, I thought I'd save the best for last. Dan Scott. Love him, hate him. This man was an incredible character, a greatly written character antagonist. I mean, personally, he used to make my blood boil, but also make me chuckle at the nerve he had to just insult people in their faces and just not hold his tongue when he was thinking something. Nathan definitely inherited that. The motives for his character are explained in the final episode. He had an inferiority complex his entire life and felt a deep desire to be seen as great and, most importantly, greater than Keith Scott. His issue, his entire life, was feeling like he was never appreciated as much as his brother Keith, even though in his head he could do everything better than him. He was also highly pressured into basketball by his father. Dan in his teenage years made a series of mistakes that would haunt him and really define the way he treated everyone in his later years. His first major regret was essentially losing his high school championship over a tantrum of not liking his coach's plays. Although he doesn't regret the existence of Nathan, he did always regret not choosing Karen and staying with her because she was the one he truly loved. That brings us to his motives on the show. With Nathan, he was continuing the toxic cycle he himself went through with his father. In addition, he was living vicariously through Nathan and reliving all his gory days. By pushing Nathan so hard, he was trying to fix the mistakes he made while also not allowing any room for error. His disdain for Lucas, I think, comes from shame and regret as well. We know that he wanted to be involved in Lucas's life, but was rejected by Karen because of his constant competition with Keith. Even raising Nathan became a competition due to Keith's proximity to both Karen and Lucas. It became about much more than having a successful son. It became about having the most successful son and beating Keith at that as well. In his final episode, he explains that killing Keith was him trying to stop that voice in his head. In his own messed up way, he really did think that Keith was taunting him. I mean, by the time we got to his murder, Keith was going to marry Karen, adopt Lucas, and have another child with Karen. Dan's perfect life, on the other hand, had completely crumbled. He was divorced from Deb, and Nathan was no longer under his control. Oh, and on top of that, he truly thought that Keith tried to kill him first. You know, as a character, he never stopped being interesting. He always brought a certain perspective to the story. In the life of his son, Nathan, he was both the greatest and the worst. He saved Nathan's family multiple times, yet destroyed his own multiple times over. Just his arc alone is worth watching over the 9 seasons. So we all know how season 1 started, right? Lucas is asked to join the team. His half-brother is against it and challenges him to a one-on-one that would determine whether or not he could join the team. Spoiler alert, he makes it, and it's where all the drama starts. Lucas likes Peyton, but starts seeing Brooke, Peyton's bestie. Not being able to control themselves, they both betray Brooke. Brooke gets hurt, brings a whole lot of drama between the friendship and just all 3 of them. Meanwhile, Peyton ends up getting closer to Jake, a single dad, but his ex Nikki causes all sorts of problems. And then Karen leaves to go to Italy to do some kind of cooking retreat, and Lucas ends up living with Keith. Disaster strikes when Lucas and Keith get into a car crash on their way to pick up Karen at the airport. Deb, tired of Dan's antique, wants a divorce, and Nathan, stuck in the middle of their messes, he eventually moves out. Karen and Deb surprisingly become pals. Keith, feeling lost, decides to leave town after Karen rejects his proposal, and Dan gets mad at him for sleeping with Deb. The season wraps up with basketball playoffs with Whitey out of the picture, so now Dan's in charge and the brothers team up against him and lose the big game. Lucas decides to leave town with Keith, but before he goes, he finds out the bombshell that Haley and Nathan got married, and with that, Lucas and Keith say their goodbyes to Tree Hill. Dan also has a heart attack, and yeah. So after hearing about Dan's heart attack, Lucas and Keith come rushing back to Tree Hill. Dan, trying to play the good guy, wants to bond with Lucas. Lucas also finds out he's got the same heart condition as Dan. Dan pays for Lucas's meds and convinces him to move in. Meanwhile, Lucas discovers Dan's sneaky plan of hiring Jules to break Keith's heart. Keith is eventually left heartbroken when Jules ditches him at the altar. Now, Nathan and Haley's love story gets a bit rocky. Haley's bosses Taylor drops by, and guess what? She was Nathan's first. And as if the drama wasn't enough, Chris Keller enters the scene, luring Haley away for a music tour. Nathan's so devastated that he tries some dangerous stunts, but eventually realizes that he needs to move on. They even talk about annulling their marriage, which is encouraged by both parents, who are very vocal and against the marriage. Peyton goes through a lot as well. She starts this club trick, but also starts doing drugs. Thankfully, Jake's back to pull her out of it. They start something up again, but since Peyton can never be happy, Nikki kidnaps the kid, forcing Jake to leave again. Brooke, on the other hand, starts a casual fling with her neighbor Felix, but after some drama and a breakup, she gets closer to Lucas again. Her dad also loses his job, and this season was really about her adapting to her new reality. She goes through a lot of instability, but she does run for student office and wins. Lucas briefly dates Anna, Felix's sister, but things get complicated when Anna starts questioning her sexuality. I think she ends up having feelings for Peyton, but I could be mistaken about the circumstances around that. I also can't remember if she ends up coming out to her parents, but I do know that her brother felt some sort of way about it, and he ended up writing some slur on Peyton's locker. They're eventually written out because the viewers hated them. Anna less than Felix, but yeah. Because Lucas lived with Dan and Deb, he eventually discovered Deb's pill addiction, and it brought its own set of drama, and she ended up going to rehab, and then Karen ended up going back to business school and dating one of her professors, Andy. The season wrapped up with Deb out of rehab, Lucas confessing his feelings to Brooke, Peyton getting creepy messages from someone who turned out to be her birth mom, Ellie, Dan getting poisoned, and his office set on fire. Haley came back, standing at Nathan's door, and Lucas and Peyton ended up in Tree Hill alone, hinting at a summer with just the 2 of them. The inaugural season of One Tree Hill premiered in September of 2003. It introduced viewers to the town of Tree Hill and most significantly to the Scott brothers, Lucas and Nathan. Their lives entangled by the shared paternity of Dan Scott and distinct maternal figures set the stage for a drama-packed, basketball-centered narrative. The very essence of season 1 can be encapsulated as a tale of two brothers originating from different worlds. Lucas, the quiet and introspective writer from the River Court, and Nathan, the high school basketball star with a chip on his shoulder, are pushed into each other's lives. The season navigates their evolving relationship, starting from animosity and competition to slowly developing mutual respect. The heart of season 1 is the juxtaposition of two worlds, the privileged and the less so. While basketball is the apparent centerpiece, the real story lies in the dynamics of family, love, and personal growth. Lucas, brought up by a single mother and mentored by his uncle Keith, contrasts sharply with Nathan, raised in an affluence by Dan Scott and his wife Deb. This season explores the ramifications of choices made by the older generation, particularly Dan's decisions on the younger Scotts. Peyton, Brooke, and Haley further enrich the narrative. Peyton's melancholy, stemming from her own personal losses, finds solace in Lucas's understanding. Brooke provides a lens into the carefree, popular clique of high school, and her character's depth begins to unravel as the season progresses. Haley, Lucas's best friend, becomes an essential bridge between the Scott brothers, especially as her relationship with Nathan blossoms. Season 1 of One Tree Hill possesses a distinct narrative rhythm, characterized by its measured pacing and intertwined storylines. While the season opens with the immediate conflict of basketball tryouts and the introduction of Lucas into Nathan's world, the subsequent episodes take their time, allowing characters and relationships to breathe and develop organically. The dual narrative of the Scott brothers runs parallel, occasionally intersecting at pivotal moments, building tension and anticipation. References to the past are effectively utilized to provide depth and context to the characters' motivations, particularly in understanding the complicated history of the older generation. Each episode artfully balances personal drama with the overarching theme of basketball, ensuring that neither overshadows the other. The pacing ensures that while every episode offers a slice of drama, it also progresses the larger narrative forward, culminating in a finale that neatly ties together the season's threads while setting the stage for future storylines. The season does a commendable job of establishing intricate relationships and setting the foundation for future arcs. Dan's antagonistic relationship with Lucas and Keith showcases the lasting effects of past choices. Simultaneously, Nathan's evolving bond with Lucas, prompted significantly by his growing love for Haley, reveals layers to his character initially hidden beneath bravado. One Tree Hill's first season is more than teen drama. It's a study in contrasts of lives led parallel but starkly different, of past choices reflecting on present lives, and of the universal teenage quest for identity amidst chaos. The basketball court in many ways serves as a battleground for these contrasts, making the sport not just a game but a metaphor for life's challenges. The sophomore season of One Tree Hill ventures deeper into the intertwining lives of the Tree Hill residents, with basketball taking a backseat. Where the inaugural season introduced us to the world of Tree Hill, season 2 delves into the emotional growth, complications, and changing dynamics of its characters. I define season 2 as a coming-of-age saga steeped in familial complexities and the challenges of young love. If season 1 was about the introductions and setting the stage, season 2 is about evolution of characters, relationships, and narratives. When season 2 aired, audiences were divided. Some cherished the deepened focus on personal growth, while others missed the centrality of basketball. New characters introduced, like Felix and Anna, didn't quite fit into the story, leaving a sour taste in the audience's mouths. Where season 1 was about contrast and establishing foundation, season 2 embraced the theme of transformation. It's about navigating the turbulent waters of adolescence, heartbreak, and self-discovery. The season takes us on a journey through Lucas's struggles with his heart condition, Nathan and Haley's tumultuous married life, Peyton struggles with solitude and finding a place in the world, and Brooke also struggling to understand her new reality as her world is flipped upside down with new financial challenges. The season is a testament to the character's resilience and adaptability. Lucas grapples with life-altering decisions. Nathan learns about commitment and sacrifice through his relationship with Haley. Brooke delves deeper into her insecurities beneath the facade of her confidence, and Peyton confronts her past and identity. Dan Scott's antagonism reaches new heights, and his relationship with Deb deteriorates further, adding layers to the adult dynamics of the series. The introduction of Keith's romantic involvement subtly ushers us into the new dynamics at play. So after summer break, Lucas and Peyton spend their entire summer together, platonically of course, but Brooke never finds out. Speaking of Brooke, she's back from Cali and throws this curveball at Lucas about having no strings attached relationship. Midway through the season, after some drama, they become exclusive again and Brooke officially starts selling her clothes over Bro's products. Now Haley's back and doesn't have anywhere to live, so she moves in with Brooke. Following the events from the previous year, Nathan and Haley are in this sort of limbo phase. He's back from his basketball camp and isn't quite ready to jump back into things with Haley. Chris Keller also comes back to help Haley with her writer's block as a regress from Nathan, who despite still being hurt over Haley, wants the best for her. Senior year starts and there's basketball, secrets, and of course drama. Whitey drops the bomb that he's retiring after this year, and Lucas is still battling with his own health issues on the down low. Peyton's world gets turned upside down this season. She finds out that Ellie's her real mom and they bond over the super emotional music project. Then right after, when she lets her guard down, Ellie passes away. Meanwhile, Dan's trying to become the mayor, Karen too. Enter Rachel, the new girl who stirs the pot. First, she tries to get between Lucas and Brooke. Then she connects with Mouth. Then she has a fling with Cooper Lee, Nathan's uncle. Later, when she decides to play the time capsule recordings for the whole school, chaos ensues, leading to a tragic event at the school and Keith's death. Peyton tries to leave Tree Hill to marry Jake, but he realizes that she loves Lucas, so he rejects her until she can figure out what she truly wants. She also dates Pete from Fall Out Boys, which really, by the end of the season, the gang, needing a break from all the craziness, heads to Rachel's cabin. They bond. Nathan and Haley get re-engaged and remarried. Brooke, Lucas, and Peyton. It's a whole love triangle mess again. So the season wraps up with a wedding reception filled with revelations and a heart-stopping cliffhanger. So senior year is wrapping up and things are getting intense. Nathan, Cooper, and Lucas survive that accident. But guess what? Haley's pregnant now. Rachel is also now obsessed with Nathan and is using his confusion about seeing Keith to try to get close to him, which don't even get me started on how ridiculous the whole seeing Keith and dead people would get on the show. We'll get back to that real quick. Pretty sure she decides to back off when she realizes that Haley is pregnant. Anywho, Brooke, fresh off ending things with Peyton and Lucas, moves in with Rachel. I don't remember mentioning this, but in season 3, they were not friends, so this was quite the development. Anyway, Rachel, being the matchmaker she is, sets up Brooke with this older guy Nick, but plot twist, he's Brooke's new teacher, and when Brooke finds out that he's cheating, it's over on... Oh, and there's this calculus test drama. Rachel and Brooke steal it, leading them to join the Clean Teens group. So that's how Brooke meets and starts dating Chase. Skills finally becomes a Raven, and Lucas is back on the team, but can only play for 15 minutes because of his heart condition. And Nathan, he's in big trouble with this loan shark, Dante. He borrowed money from him as a last resort after his parents wouldn't help him settle his bills. He's then forced to do this whole point shaving thing, but last minute decides not to. So the Ravens win the state championship. Dante tries to run Nathan over but ends up hitting Haley. Lucas collapsed from a heart attack after not taking his heart medication in order to not allow the point shaving. Talk about drama. Oh, and that's also where he picks Peyton. Like, that's where the "it's you" speech happens. So Dan's in jail for a while thinking he killed Dante, but it turns out Dante died from the car crash. All while Karen is warming up to Dan again. In the meantime, Deb's life is spiraling with her pill addiction, leading to Nathan and Haley moving in with her. On prom night, Lucas finds out from Abby that Dan killed Keith, and Peyton, she's attacked by her stalker Ian, who up until a certain point was pretending to be her brother, but Brooke comes to the rescue. The two girls team up, take down Ian, and their friendship is back on track. They later go on to have another prom in another town in Texas, I think. Then during graduation, Haley goes into labor in the middle of her speech, and Karen also gives birth. In the season finale, Nathan and Haley welcome their baby boy, James Lucas Scott. Everyone gets together for one last party. Oh yeah, and Lucas confronts Dan. His guilt finally wins him over, and he turns himself in. And as the season wraps up, everyone gathers at the River Court for a nostalgic game of basketball, ending with Nathan and Lucas playing one-on-one just like old times. Season 3 of One Tree Hill is a masterclass in emotional storytelling, combining the challenges of senior year with the intricate dynamics of young love and unresolved family tensions. The season delves into the idea of futures, both the one we envision and the one we end up with. Lucas confronts his relationships with both Brooke and Peyton while also grappling with Dan's increasing malevolence. Nathan and Haley, after the turmoil of season 2, work towards rebuilding their relationship and face the challenges of a young marriage. Peyton delves into her past, discovering more about her biological mother, leading to some heart-wrenching moments. Brooke, on the other hand, continues to try to find happiness and trust Lucas again while channeling her feelings through her craft. She ends up creating something major. Season 3 stands out for its character development. While the previous seasons established the groundwork, this season adds depth, showcasing the evolution of each character. This season is marked by tragedies, including Keith's shocking demise, which becomes a pivotal point for many characters, especially Lucas. This season's profoundness is evident in its masterful intertwining of joy and pain. On the one hand, we have the joyous reunion of Nathan and Haley, the spark of love rekindling between Lucas and Brooke, and the Scott brothers' strengthened bond. Conversely, the shadows of pain are casted by Dan's treachery, Peyton's heart-wrenching journey of discovering her biological mother, and most devastatingly, Keith's untimely death. One of the standout themes of season 3 is confrontation and acceptance. Nathan and Haley confront the challenges of a young, impulsive marriage and the hurdles of trust and commitment and working towards building that trust again. Peyton faces the emotional roller coaster of connecting with her birth mother only to lose her to an illness shortly after. Dan's descent into darkness is fully realized this season. And Karen, with her rekindled romance with Keith, confronts the possibility of a shared future, a dream shattered by Keith's tragic death. One Tree Hill's third season is a poignant portrayal of growth, love, loss, and second chances. It captures the essence of the uncertainties of life, the pain of loss, and the hope for the future. The season's finale, with its mix of despair and hope, sets the stage for a new chapter in the lives of Tree Hill residents. Season 3 stands as a pivotal juncture in One Tree Hill, presenting a narrative filled with highs and lows, triumphs and tragedies. It's the bridge between the innocence of youth and the precipice of adulthood, with the characters navigating their senior year and all the complexities it brings. Season 4, right behind Season 3, which was arguably the most transformative chapter of One Tree Hill, pivots from the angst of adolescence to the precipice of adulthood. It's not just about the end of high school, it's about the characters confronting their past, shaping their present, and gazing into an uncertain future. I would define Season 4 as transitions and trepidations. Beyond the cap and gown, graduation symbolizes a threshold. For Lucas, Nathan, Peyton, Brooke, and Haley, it's the intersection of dreams realized and futures uncertain. While some paths seem clear, like Lucas and Peyton's budding romance, others, such as Nathan's athletic journey post-accident, tread on shaky ground. The weight of secrets is also prevalent during this season. Dan's dark secret about Keith's murder looms large, culminating in a confession that sends shockwaves through Tree Hill. This theme also resonates in other subplots, like the mystery surrounding Peyton's stalker and Nathan's point shaving. Season 4 stands as a testament to One Tree Hill's storytelling prowess. It's a season of revelations and reckonings, dreams and dilemmas. As the characters stand at life's crossroads, the season beautifully captures the essence of that pivotal moment when the familiarity of yesterday beckons, but the promise of tomorrow awaits. So fast forward 4.5 years after high school, things have changed quite a bit. Lucas is coaching the Ravens and he's dating Lindsay, his book editor. She's pushing him to write another novel. Turns out he had proposed to Peyton 3 years ago and she turned down his proposal. Like always, his ego and pride took a big hit and he left her for not wanting to get married at 19. Nathan and Haley are parents now, raising their son Jamie, but Nathan had this accident that messed up his basketball dreams. Haley's teaching at Tree Hill High and Mel's job hunting. Brooke made it big in New York with her fashion line Crossover Bros. Peyton's in LA, but she's not loving her job. They both realize they're happier in Tree Hill, so they head back. Back in Tree Hill, Brooke opens a store, but her mom, Victoria, comes in to rain on her parade. Brooke starts dating Owen. At some point, they go to NYC and find Rachel, Brooke's former model and friend, overdosed in her apartment. After some drama with her mom and Rachel, Brooke cuts ties with both. Peyton starts her own record label and she discovers Mia, a new artist. She also reconnects with Haley for a music project, and obviously there's tension between Peyton and Lindsay because of Lucas. After a kiss with Lucas, things get even more complicated. Mouth gets a job at a TV station. He has a liaison with with his boss, and then later starts dating Brooke's assistant, Millicent. Nathan tries to get his life back on track, and he mentors Quentin, this troublesome basketball player, Raven, but things get messy when their nanny, Carrie, tries to seduce Nathan, and after a huge fight resulting in Jamie almost drowning, Haley wants a divorce. Carrie later on kidnaps Jamie, but he's saved by Dan. Dan is out of prison and tries to reconnect with his family, but he's got a ticking clock with his heart condition. Brooke wants to start a family and gets temporary custody of a little girl, Angie, who stays with her for medical reasons. After giving into his impulses once more, Lucas kisses Peyton and then runs to propose to Lindsay. At this point, the show is still trying to convince us that Brooke is still in the running, even though Lucas subconsciously wrote a book about Peyton. Once Lindsay puts two and two together, literally at the altar, she leaves Lucas. In the finale, Brooke has to say goodbye to Angie, which breaks her heart. Lucas, after a rough patch, decides he needs to make some big decisions about his love life. Mouth considers a new job opportunity. Skills and Debs are secretly dating. Nathan and Haley are finding their way back to their passions. And Dan, well, he's facing mortality. The big cliffhanger, Lucas is at the airport and calls someone to join him in Vegas to get married. Who did he call? Brooke, Peyton, or Lindsay? Everyone's left guessing. After a drag of an episode, we find out that Peyton is the one that Lucas called up. They become engaged and have a pretty dreamy season and even get pregnant. The whole situation becomes a little more morbid when Peyton ends up having a high-risk pregnancy. Julian comes in to adapt Lucas's book, and we find out that he and Peyton dated in the past. Lucas is a little skeptical of him, but I guess seeing him get closer to Brooke made him realize that he wasn't back to be with Peyton. Oh, and by the way, Dawson, James, joins the cast as some loony director, which was the weirdest thing to watch. I personally thoroughly enjoyed his appearance on the show because it was a really cool nod to Dawson's Creek. Anyway, tragedy would strike in Tree Hill after Quentin was shot and killed. That storyline was just so cruel. And on top of that, Brooke starts off this season in such an awful way. She gets attacked in her store and she's going through it. She would later foster a teenage girl, Jenna from Awkward, and would almost adopt her. But alas, Sam came back into contact with her birth mother, and so yeah, that falls through. We did later on find out that Evan Peters' character, sorry, I'm really bad with the names right now, had a big brother, and that big brother was not only responsible for Brooke's attack but also Quentin's murder. Brooke would finally have a chance to confront him at the end of the season. Mouth and Millie go through their first rough patch when Gigi comes back, which I didn't mention this earlier, but how wild is it that the actress playing Gigi was casted when she was 14? Like, how? Why? Okay. So yeah, that stirs some drama between Mouth and Millie. She ends up sleeping with Owen and he ends up breaking his sobriety after some drama with Brooke. And I mean, who wrote that? It's not even the V card part. Like, whatever. She's a grown woman. She can do whatever she wants. But Millie not reacting to Owen saying that he was going to break his sobriety was kind of wild to me. Either way, just the show started getting really lazy with the way they were writing storylines at this point, I swear, because tell me why they decided that they didn't want Millie to wear glasses anymore, so they just tell us that she got LASIK off screen. Also, this is where they started filling the gaps of storylines by pairing off supporting characters to be together. Anywho, again, Nathan ends up working his way back into playing ball slowly but surely, and by the end of the season, he gets drafted to play for the Bobcats. Pretty sure Carrie returns at some point, to do some crap with Dan or do some crap to Dan. And on Haley's side, after standing her ground on Sam's English assignment, she ends up leaving teaching to go back and focuses on her career. And oh yeah, a dog eats Dan's heart. That actually happens. That happens. It's not a joke. Okay. Season 5 offers a bold narrative gambit, leaping 4.5 years into the future and bypassing the college years. This transition, while audacious, brings a fresh perspective. Instead of the typical college-centric storylines, we delve into the characters' early adult lives, replete with their challenges, achievements, and setbacks. Gone are the days of high school simplicity. The real world, with its career challenges, relationship intricacies, and personal dilemmas, takes center stage. It's now about dreams meeting reality. Lucas is a published author, struggling to write his second book. Peyton struggling in the music business. Brooke's flourishing fashion empire, but personal void. And Nathan's crushed basketball dreams. Past echoes are also thematic through this season. While the season propels forward, the echoes of the past are ever present. Past decisions, relationships, and unresolved tensions weave into the narrative, reminding us that while time moves on, some ghosts linger. The season's time jump is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it breathes freshness into the narrative, giving the viewers a novel vantage point. However, this also means that viewers are thrust into a new world with off-screen developments that might have deserved more focus and exploration. Character arcs are rich and varied, but there's a sense of nostalgia for high school dynamics. Some storylines, like the love triangle involving Lucas, feel rehashed, while others like Brooke's journey or Nathan and Haley's home life, as well as marital problems, offer genuine depth. Season 5 of One Tree Hill is an ambitious exploration of early adulthood, capturing the euphoria of dreams achieved, derailed, and the sting of reality's challenges. It's a blend of familiar and the new, offering a mature, albeit occasional, uneven narrative progression. Season 6 in many ways feels like the turning point for One Tree Hill. As the characters further delve into adulthood, this season offers both resolutions to long-standing plot lines and introduces fresh challenges, ensuring that the narrative remains dynamic. This season once again puts relationships under the microscope, whether it's Brooke's adoption journey and her new romance with Julian, the evolution of Nathan's basketball career juxtaposed against Haley's challenges as a mother, teacher, and artist, or Deb and Skill's unexpected romance. The season thrives on pushing characters to go after what they want and exploring uncharted territories. This season's strength lies in its ability to balance dramatic highs with emotional depth. Pivotal events like Lucas and Peyton's departure and the culmination of Dan's redemption arc are handled with gravitas, offering a sense of closure to long-standing narratives. However, this season obviously isn't without its critiques. The season began the long trend of slowing down the story just a bit too much. Some of the older characters were also beginning to fall off the circles as there was nothing added to explore for them. Season 6 of One Tree Hill stands as a narrative crossroads. It offers resolutions, introduces fresh challenges, and ensures the legacy of the characters remains intact. It's a testament to life's unpredictability, capturing moments of joy, sorrow, and the myriad emotions in between. So years passed since Lucas and Peyton left Tree Hill and the gang's facing new challenges and adventures. Nathan's NBA career is on fire, but a scandal threatens to derail everything. A woman claims to have slept with Nathan and is carrying his child. This puts a strain on his relationship with Haley. Speaking of Haley, she's juggling motherhood, managing Red Bedroom Records, going on tour, and dealing with the return of her sister Quinn. After a great summer, Brooke and Julian go through some this season. She ends up in an emotionally distressing situation again when Julian won't take his distances from Alex, who's an actress hired by Brooke for her company. The whole thing brings her back to her Peyton-Lucas triangle stuff, and on top of that, she finds out that she's infertile, so it's also a rough season for her. Julian does stay in Tree Hill with Brooke, and despite her objections, he does bond with Alex on a totally platonic level. And then there's Clay, Nathan's sport agent and Quinn's love interest. Clay's dealing with his own demons, haunted by the death of his wife. Speaking of Quinn, she's trying to move on from a divorce and find solace with Clay, but her estranged husband isn't ready to let go and even starts dating her sister at one point. Mouth and Millicent's relationship hits a rough patch. Millie's new modeling career leads her to doing drugs. The breakup is messy and Millie's life spirals out of control. Dan, believe it or not, is now a motivational speaker and marries Rachel. Yes, that Rachel. And together they run a show, but it's clear that Rachel's in it for money and fame. The James mom comes back. I think her name is Lydia. She comes back to town to say goodbye to her daughters before passing away, leaving the girls devastated. Haley takes it the hardest, falling into a depression. In the finale, Haley's pregnant again. Brooke and Julian are blissfully in love, and things seem to be looking up for most of our Tree Hill favorites. But with Katie, Clay's stalker, who looks exactly like his late wife, shooting both Clay and Quinn in the closing moments, the season ends on a cliffhanger. This season is packed with drama, shootings, stalkers, and heartbreak, but there are highs too. Brooke and Julian get engaged, and Nathan is cleared of all scandal charges. Season 8 picks up with Clay and Quinn fighting for their lives after the shocking shooting. They both pull through, but trauma lingers, especially with Quinn. Brooke and Julian are in full wedding planning mode, but it's not all smooth sailing. Brooke faces an unexpected challenge. Her mother lied to investors about the company's earnings and causes a lot of damage. Because of this, Victoria goes to jail, and out of guilt, Brooke sells her company to help those that were scammed. As she navigates the ups and downs of wedding planning, dealing with Julian's mother, and managing her new finances, Julian's by her side, and the two tie the knot in a heartwarming ceremony. They also almost adopt a baby, but the baby mama backs out last minute. But a few weeks later, Brooke finds out that she's pregnant with twins. Haley's expecting, and she's also volunteering at a crisis helpline. Nathan transitions from his NBA career due to health and family reasons and explores new opportunities like sports agency and school. Alex and Chase also start a thing, but it's complicated, especially when Mia, Chase's ex, comes back into town. So there's this whole love triangle thing there too. Season 7 of One Tree Hill is a chapter of reinvention. With Lucas and Peyton's departure, the narrative landscape undergoes a significant shift, introducing new characters and story arcs. The season, set 14 months after the events of the previous one, grapples with the challenges of keeping the essence of Tree Hill intact while ushering in a new era. From Brooke's struggles with trust between her relationship with Julian to Nathan's scandals that threatens his NBA career, the characters face internal and external challenges. The introduction of new characters like Clay and Quinn adds new dynamics. One of the season's merits is its ability to reinvent while preserving core elements. The introduction of new faces intertwined with engaging story arcs for established characters keeps the narrative vibrant. Especially noteworthy is the season's exploration of mental health, trauma, and healing. However, again, this season cannot escape critique. The absence of Lucas and Peyton is palpable, and while the new characters bring fresh dynamics, they also face the uphill task of filling significant voids. Some subplots, like the stalker storyline, border on melodramatic, occasionally detracting from the season's overall authenticity. Season 7 of One Tree Hill is a narrative experiment, a blend of the old and the new. While it courageously treads new paths, it also evokes nostalgia for what once was. Season 8 stands as the emblem of rejuvenation in the One Tree Hill saga. The series, now far removed from its high school roots, delves deeper into the intricacies of family, personal aspirations, and the challenges of mid-adulthood set against the familiar backdrop of Tree Hill. The heart of this season lies in its exploration of family, from Brooke and Julian's journey to marriage and parenthood to Haley's pregnancy. The narrative underlines the joys, anxieties, and transformative powers of family bond. Triumph over adversity is also a recurring theme, be it Nathan's quest to mentor new actors and let go of the dream he once had his entire life, or Brooke and Julian's collective efforts to rescue Jamie from a life-threatening situation, Quinn grappling with the scars of her near-death experience. This season underscores resilience and unity in the face of challenges. This season shines in its portrayal of everyday moments, interspersed with dramatic highs. Episodes like the superhero-themed comic relief or the Thanksgiving episode encapsulate the series' ability to blend the mundane with profound, offering both entertainment and introspection. However, season 8 isn't without its detractors. Some fans found certain storylines tad disjointed. Moreover, as the series progressed, there's an increasing nostalgia for earlier seasons and original characters, making it a challenge for the narrative to consistently strike a chord. Season 8 of One Tree Hill is a tapestry of life's myriad moments, the triumphant, the tragic, and the transformative. While it beautifully encapsulates the themes of love, family, and resilience, it also serves as a reminder of the series' evolution and inevitable longing for its early charm. All right, let's dive into the final season of One Tree Hill. Okay, so Dan's caught back in town and he's got a mission, redemption, but it's not going to be easy, especially with all the bad blood in the past. Brooke and Julian are adjusting to life as parents of twins. She's also trying to fix her relationship with her parents as well as build a new company, but trouble's brewing. Xavier, the guy who attacked her a few years ago, is out of prison and he's got revenge on his mind. Nathan's life takes a dark turn when he's kidnapped. He's held hostage by some shady folks because of some sports agency crap. This crisis brings the Scott family together with Dan, Haley, and even Chris Keller teaming up to save him. The rescue mission is intense, and in a heart-wrenching twist, Dan sacrifices his life to save Nathan. Clay's dealing with some heavy stuff too. He's got a son, Logan, from his past relationship, but he's forgotten all about him due to a trauma-induced memory block. As he reconnects with his son, he and Quinn grow stronger and eventually get married. Chase and Chris Keller, and Chuck too, bring some comic relief amidst the drama. Their running trick and their bromance is pure gold. Mouth gets a lot of flack because he gains weight but loses it all by the end of this season at Millie's insistence, of course. He starts a sports scholarship in memory of Jimmy Edwards and Keith Scott with the inheritance money he got from Dan. The series finale is a tribute to the show's legacy. There's a big event at Trick celebrating the Tree Hill community. We see flashbacks, touching moments, and get a sense of closure for all our beloved characters. The curtain call for When Tree Hill arrives with season 9 as characters confront both new and long-standing challenges. The series ties up narrative threads, offering resolutions while staying true to the essence of Tree Hill. Kind of. Endings and beginnings. The season is a poignant reminder of the passage of time. While it brings closure to some stories like Dan's redemption arc, it also hints at new beginnings, such as Brooke and Julian's life as parents. As the series wraps up, characters are forced to grapple with their past. Old grudges, regrets, and unresolved tensions resurface, demanding resolution. The final season excels in its ability to blend nostalgia with fresh narrative elements. The return of past characters and callbacks to the earlier seasons offer fans a trip down memory lane, mainly Chris Keller and Karen's Cafe. Moreover, the season's darker and more dramatic tone, especially with Nathan's kidnapping, adds an element of suspense, setting it apart from the previous seasons. With only 13 episodes, some fans felt certain storylines were rushed and not all characters received the closure they deserved. Additionally, the absence of key characters like Lucas and Peyton in significant portions of the final season left some fans yearning for a more comprehensive reunion. Season 9 of One Tree Hill is a bittersweet farewell. It encapsulates the series' essence, offering a mix of drama, emotion, and nostalgia. While it beautifully ties up a decade-long narrative, it also leaves fans with the lingering sentiment of what might have been, making the goodbye all more poignant. Personally, I think it's interesting that the seasons sort of come in pairs, with the latter always being a little weaker. Season 1 and Season 2 were the same year and were linked story-wise, but Season 1 was better received. Same with Season 3 and 4, that were sister seasons, but the first part, Season 3, being much better in my opinion than Season 4. I think in general for most of us, Season 3 was the best one out of the show. It had some of the most impactful moments and additions. It was a very huge turning point for the show and the characters. Season 5 and Season 6 were the early young adult years. Everyone was sort of lost and still finding themselves, and at this point is where all the remaining characters, with the exception of Nathan and Haley of course, would either meet or get together with the people they would start families with in the future. There's a much bigger debate on which is better between season 5 and 6, and personally, just like with all the other pair seasons, I preferred season 5 to season 6. I thought season 6 had a more strong narrative direction. There was just a more clear beginning and end than with season 6 in my opinion. And again, this is more of a personal taste thing than anything else. Season 7 and 8 were the reboot seasons. It was the show trying to keep the lives of most of these characters interesting, even after most of them had gotten what they were looking for. To me, Season 7 did a much better job simply because once again, it felt like there was a more clear narrative direction. Season 8 to me felt much more loose, and don't get me wrong, you could prefer either. I really, and I mean really, struggled to get through Season 7 and have not really watched it again since, but the show was already more filler than anything else by that point, but the fillers would usually be the side characters like Miranda and Grubbs, which, by the way, how to know if something is unnecessary? Take it out and see if it makes a difference. Miranda and Grubbs, silliest addition, and I'm sure some people enjoyed it. I just really had a hard time not skipping over it. To me, season 8 was a season about watching your favorite characters have fun, have a good time, and really enjoy what it's like to live in a small town. Of course, episodes like The Storm added a little drama to keep viewers hooked, but all in all, the show's climate, had completely changed by that point, complete 180, which understandably so. Listen, to me, here's the fatal flaw of the later seasons. There was a lack of follow through and authenticity. You have these same stories coming back during the last 4 seasons, and for the most part, the characters just move on as if nothing. And I think the best example was the Storm episode. In season 5, at least, Jamie was afraid of water after nearly drowning, and it's at least mentioned that he's in therapy after being kidnapped. But then the kid gets into a car crash on a stormy night, gets thrown over a bridge while still in the car, and almost dies because the lake or river or whatever is overflowing because of a broken dam, and it's barely ever addressed again. Like, how? A school teacher was driving the car and other students were in that car too, and I'm pretty sure she also sent an inappropriate picture of herself to a student in like season 9, I think, or season 8 by accident. I could be mistaken, but in any case, completely inappropriate, yet her character would just pop in and out as if nothing. And I mean, the biggest enemy of a teen drama is a post-graduation story. Most will go down the college route, and One Tree Hill was smart not to, but they were also not smart to keep the show going that long either, and that's a hill that I'll die on. Every story has a beginning and an end with a specific amount of wiggle room for you to stretch the story out and make it interesting, but when you get to the end of a story and you want to keep it going, that's where the issue is. I understand that to keep a story interesting after its intended ending, you need to keep creating stuff or it won't really be worth watching. But then that usually destroys the cohesion of a story. You just can't keep going without the story becoming a soapy over-the-top drama. And once again, One Tree Hill chose to go the other way for the most part. And I mean, from time to time, they lightly grazed on the dramatic and over-the-top, but for the most part, I think they chose to respect their characters and their stories, which is a good thing. But it isn't always the most interesting thing to watch after getting closure several times, so, there's that. Just like season 7, season 9 was an even bigger attempt to tell us another story after the happily ever after. Something about the show ending in season 8 and then suddenly being renewed again just made it so weird. Like, you're almost confused after the season 8 finale because of how full circle it is. And again, because the show is supposed to end, James ended up not being available for most of the season, and Jane as well. I personally ate up season 9 because of Dan. Whether you accept his redemption or not, you gotta admit he had one of the most, if not the most interesting 9 season arc. For example, I often miss the absence of Lucas, even though he would piss me off, but in Danny Boy I realized that his absence was what allowed Dan's redemption arc to be complete for me. And again, that's just for me. Either way, season 9 is the biggest hit or miss for fans, and I personally sometimes prefer it over season 7 and 8, but that really just depends on the day. Oh, and can I just add like my biggest peeve about the show real quick? The whole afterlife/limbo thing that they do every time someone's unconscious in the hospital. I cannot stand when shows that are based on reality dabble with stuff like this. Like, some of them might have just been dreams, right? Like, whatever. Like, maybe in his subconscious, Lucas always felt weird about Keith's death and dreamt about it when he was out of it. But also, it's still weird because sometimes they'll have these unconscious characters hover over themselves and be perfectly aware of what other characters are saying and doing from their hospital beds. Look at when Quinn and Clay got shot. And again, it would have been fine for me if they did it once or twice, but at one point, every time a character was in the hospital, they'd be walking around with Keith in the hospital or wherever else. And again, I understand that these characters were grieving and Keith was a significant character, but honestly, the Quinn and Clay hospital trip it's where I broke. I mean, right before, Nathan was having full conversations with a dead person. It's just like, I think one of the best hospital alternate reality episodes was the one where Nathan and Lucas switched spots. That makes sense. That's really good. But yeah, I don't know. It just wasn't my thing. And that like used to ruin the credibility of the story for me all the time. Like these characters apparently seeing Keith and dead people. And it was just weird for me. Again, could just be dreams, but that's not, I don't think that that's what they were implying. Oh, and one more thing. My Gilmore Girls video was filled with comments about how Chad left the show to come and be on One Tree Hill, and I want to address that. Chad left Gilmore Girls because he booked a season arc on Dawson's Creek's 5th season as Charlie Todd, somewhere around late 2001 to 2002, which is why he was written out and Milo was brought in to be Jess. I hated his character on that show, and oh, another fun fact. The reason why they wanted him to play Nathan was because he played 2 back-to-back roles where he was a prick, and they thought that he'd be perfect for that role. And to add to that, Hillary also appeared in the Spring Break episode, and she says that the chemistry they saw with Chad in that scene might be the reason why she got that push to be Peyton. Anyway, yeah, made a lot of mistakes on that video, might even make a couple more on here, but those comments just kept coming back, so I just thought I'd address it, especially that it's relevant to this video, I guess. In the world of One Tree Hill, from the cobblestone streets of Tree Hill to the echoing corridors of its high school, One Tree Hill was more than just a show. It was a tapestry of emotions, dreams, and the raw essence of youth. At the heart of its narrative was the town's basketball court, a sacred place where rivalries were born, friendships solidified, and life lessons learned. It wasn't just about a game. It was the heartbeat of the community, the pulse of young dreams, and the intricate dance of destiny. Its characters were not mere fictional entities. They were fragments of us. Lucas, with his introspective nature and love for literature, taught us the power of words and the weight of choices. Nathan, with his journey from arrogance to humility, showed us that redemption is always within reach. Peyton's artistic soul and Brooke's indomitable spirit were testaments to resilience of the human heart. And then there was Haley, the beacon of loyalty and steadfastness, whose journey from a cautious tutor to a confident woman underscored the beauty of self-discovery and the strength found in steadfast love and friendship. Through their trials, tribulations, joys, and sorrows, we saw our own reflections, our own fears, and our own hopes. But what truly set One Tree Hill apart was its uncanny ability to capture the ephemeral moments of adolescence, the fleeting nature of first loves, the sting of betrayal, the warmth of reconciliation, and the pain of growth. The storylines, no matter how dramatic, always circled back to the core truths of life. The moments where Karen imparted wisdom to Lucas or when Whitey guided his basketball team were not just scenes, they were life lessons wrapped in dialogue, reminding us of the mentors in our own lives. The soundtrack was not just background music, it was the very soul of the narrative. Every strum, every lyric, every note resonated with the emotions on screen, making us feel what they were feeling as well. From Gavin DeGraw's iconic I Don't Wanna Be to the lesser known indie known tracks, it introduced us to a symphony of feelings. In essence, One Tree Hill was not just a show, it was a coming of age journey that celebrated the imperfections, embraced the chaos, and highlighted the beauty of the mundane. In a world of fleeting moments, it was a tireless reminder of the magic of youth, the power of dreams, and the enduring nature of love. All right, that's all that I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm still testing out this format, so some things may be different than previous videos. I'm taking in feedback and seeing what's working and fixing hopefully some mistakes I've made in the past. If you stuck around to this point, thanks a bunch. I really appreciate you fully listening to what I have to say, whether you agree or not. I know I tend to have polarizing opinions. Either way, comment down below any thoughts you have about the show and let's chat. And thanks again for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.